All right, the last part of this reading talk about investment governance. Now, let's take a look at this portfolio management ongoing process. Of course, this chapter, the focus is asset allocation, and we know that asset allocation is one of the probably the most important steps for the portfolio management process. The portfolio management process, we know that it provides a roadmap of investment. And that roadmap is we call IPS, Investment Policy Statement. And this is a very nice chart. However, how do you ensure that we can execute that correctly? Right. Therefore, for a firm, right, investment company or a portfolio firm, how do we actually make sure that we will actually follow this roadmap, the IPS, and execute our portfolio optimization correctly, such as the optimal selection and the best risk and return management. So here, to do that, we need to have some kind of a good structure of do it. That structure is the investment governance. So the investment governance is a structure to ensure that assets are invest achieve the IPS specification. There's an investment, empirical evidence. All right, the study show that institute with better investment governors outperform their peer by average about 1 to 2% annually. Remember that 1 to 2% annually, that is a quite significant return. So this indicates the importance of investment governors. To understand the investment governors, we need to see there's three party of investment decision making. We want to see their responsibility and activities. There are three party. The first one is the investment committee. The second one is the investment staff or manager, investment manager inside that portfolio, inside that firm. And outside the firm, we have a third party consultant. So there's three party there. Now remember here, what we are talking about is institutional investor, not individuals. So for the institutional investment, the decision making have to be conducted by three groups, right? The investment committee, the staff member, and outside consultants. So what are their responsibility here? We have the list, five different items here, from investment mission, the IPS, asset allocation policy, investment manager selection, portfolio construction, monitoring and allocation, risk management, monitoring and performance, then the evaluation. But here, we're going to see the case and then we go back here to just review quickly. But here, the talk about is that the organization of decision making, responsibility, and their activities. Okay. Now, for the investment committee, basic function is approval. All right, it's approval function. For the investment staff, all right, or the investment managers, their major function is the execution, monitoring, analyzing, analysis, conduct analysis. Now here I like to, before we do the see the case, I like to you to be aware of that, pay attention to this. Here we talk about investment manager selection. Now, since this is an institutional investor, say a foundation, for example, the university foundation or a trust fund, when they do investment, they do not purchase individual stocks or bond. They usually is to invest to other fund, such as another mutual fund or ETF, or maybe other private equity or REIT, and so on. And these other funds they invest, we call manager. So the investment manager selection is the asset class selection. Okay, it's just a term we call manager. Now, consultant have played a very similar role as the investment staff, but they are hiring as a third-party resources. Let's use an example, right? The case study in the book, and then we can see this particular responsibility and function, that the role they need to play under the investment governors. Let's take a look at the case number one. Case number one describe a firm, all right, decide to get rid of their hedge fund and the funds of fund in their portfolio. This company is called XYZ, and the hedge fund and the funds of fund take 15% of their total asset allocation, which means it's very significant. Okay. Then say, well, here's a statement say, although the hedge fund are viable strategy for some, when judged against their complexity and cost, hedge fund investment is no longer warrant for XYZ. So they have a judgment there. All right. So they decide that because the complexity or the cost of the funds of fund and the hedge fund, so they decide, well, we are not going to do that. So here's a question. Question actually says, state what factor would be relevant in evaluating whether this decision to exit hedge fund was consistent with effective investment governors. All right, well, governors. Here is a good question, right? If you are a manager, would you do that? All right, you know that hedge fund and funds of fund is very costly and it's very complex. You know, so what's the problem here? All right, the assessment of hedge fund complexity and cost, or funds of fund. All right, we know that cost, high cost and high complexity is well known. All right, the question is why you do that one in the first place. All right, suppose you have an investment policy statement. All right, so we know investment policy statement, you have to do internal and external assessment, and then going to asset allocation. So you suppose assess the risk and return characteristic of hedge fund already. So the complexity and cost supposed to be known, and then now why you want to change that? Just because the complexity and cost factor. So it's inconsistent with the IPS. Obviously, that is a suspect. We suspect that they don't have, right? Which means the XYZ fund, they don't have the IPS. Okay. So what is the XYZ investment purpose on hedge funds? Right. So we don't find why they want to do it. Obviously, probably they don't have very effective IPS, or they already have IPS and they never execute that. So you see that how important that IPS is. All right. Otherwise, this policy would change randomly and subjectively. Now, in this case, later on, the XYZ company, all right, have a statement say that, or the decision on hedge fund was precipitated by an allegation of wrongdoing. All right, here's a term called wrongdoing by a senior executive. Senior executive with the hedge fund selection responsibility in the XYZ Alternative Investment Strategy Group. So the decision of taking away 15% of their allocation was conducted by wrongdoing by a senior executive from the Alternative Investment Strategy Group. That is a major problem. All right. So here's the question. In light of both statements, identify the deficiency in XYZ investment governance. There's a huge deficiency. Now this is conducted by the senior executive, which means they staff. but it had never been overseen or oversight by the investment committee. So investment committee failed to, all right, actually doing their business. So we have the inadequate oversight by the investment committee. Okay. And even worse is that all those decision making are not based on investment from the IPS. In other words, either they don't have IPS, second is they never respect the IPS, they never actually follow the IPS. This is a major drawback. Okay, major drawback. That's the reason we got this kind of consequence of an executive staff doing their own decision making and wrong decision making. All right, the next case we talk about the relationship between the investment committee and the investment executive, all right, the staff member. So we have the CIO. We have one CIO. The CIO report to a 9 members committee board, the investment committee board, the board of director, of course, for that. And here say that the investment staff, which is the CIO, the member draft the asset allocation policy in conjunction with the consultants and make recommendation to the investment committee. So they make recommendation to the investment committee. Then the investment committee review and approves. Review and approve policy and any change in policy, including the strategic asset allocation. So that's back to the table here to see the responsibility and the duty and the activity of the party. The CIO actually as the investment staff. The board of director is the investment committee. The investment committee here, their function is to oversee the portfolio, and also approve some of their decision policy making by the investment staff. Now, please make sure you understand this relationship. Very important. Now let's back to the case 2. The case 2 say that the investment committee makes manager structure, conduct manager analysis, make manager selection decisions. This is really the problem. The committee cannot make the manager structure. Manager structure means their asset allocation structure, right? The manager are those asset classes and conduct the analysis. We know that previous table, the analysis is supposed to be conducted by whom? The investment staff, not the committee. And make change selection decision. They don't make decision. They can approve the decision. They don't make the decision. Okay, so we know that this is the major conflict of the decision making process. All right, in the investment governance. Now let's look at the CIO. The CIO, on the other hand, build a staff organization which include the head of a major each major asset classes, which is fine. In examination decision over the last 5 years, fine. We have noted that several instances in which political and non-economic consideration. All right, this is the key word. Political, non-economic consideration appear to have influenced the investment program, including the selection of the local private equity investment. Local. So there is some kind of conflict of interest because the CIO make an investment decision supposed based on the IPS. When the IPS roadmap is supposed to be a neutral position, should not have any conflict of interest. This is obvious the problem that with you using your political and non-economical consideration for decision making, that is conflict of interest, which is to violate the IPS. Continue. Generally, the board spend much of its time debating individual manager strategy. Now back to the board. The board spent a lot of time debating individual manager strategy. Manager strategy is asset allocation strategy. Again, this is the problem. The board should not debating that. The board just approved their decision from the investment staff for inclusion in the portfolio and evaluating investment manager performance. Evaluation is not their job, right? With the comparability, little time devoted to the asset allocation and risk management. All those are violate, all right, the basic investment governance rule. So here in this case, we got the question: what are the questionable governance practice from the above statement? Now we can summarize in here for the investment committee level of involvement individuals manager selection and evaluation is probably too deep. Not probably too big. It is a violation. It is too deep, right? They should not involve any manager selection and evaluation. Individual manager selection is an implementation or execution, not strategic decision itself. The investment committee only focus on the strategic decision. The manager selection is the execution. It's not the strategic decision making. Therefore, it should be done by the staff, not the committee. This is, of course, we know that it should not be doing that. So this is similar to the first one. Manager evaluation should be provided by the staff expert and consultant. Again, the manager selection evaluation is whose job is the investment staff, all right, and of course conjunction with the consultant. The investment committee had no influence, should have no influence for the manager's evaluation. Okay. They could approve or make some suggestion. Finally, the CIO make a major problem. Finding the political and non-economic influences we have mentioned before is a conflict of interest. The investment decision, right, by selecting the manager and by selection the manager process under this case is misplaced. The CIO is a self-interest, does not really consider based on do not follow the IPS to make the decision. This is a strong wording. We need to put it there. It's misplaced. So they have an inadequate set of governance policies, okay, or checks and balance as related to the investment committee itself. In conclusion, all right, this case show you that the investment governance in this case is inadequate and has many different type plays that conflict interest, and that will cause the loss or perhaps maybe the investment wrongdoing that will affect the regional investor. So the case show you that how important that the investment governor is, and I wish everybody go back to study this two case carefully and doing this for several time, and then compare that to the table I summarize it here and understand that and memorize that.